closing up the breaches.
Yeah, and this is,
Let me quickly read this. Matthew 24:14. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man travelling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. It's the point. Verse 15. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To every man according to his several ability. And straightway he took his journey. So everyone's been bestowed gifts there's been gifts appointed to you in this walk of faith onto the kingdom of heaven in accordance with what your ability to serve the Lord is. So the Lord didn't give it to you in vain. He gave it to you to utilize it and to bring in with usury, basically. He wants his money back with usury, with interest.
yeah, it's about rousing up the elect, man. Because, hey, it's what's it saying? Amos 9. Not the least grain shall fall on the earth. So Sirach 45 and 13. Before him there were none such, neither did ever any stranger put them one, but only his children and his children's children perpetually. Their sacrifices shall be wholly consumed every day twice, continually. Moses consecrated him and anointed him with holy oil. This was appointed unto him by an everlasting covenant unto his seed, so long as the heavens should remain, that they should minister unto him and execute the office of the priesthood and bless the people in his name. He chose him out of all men living to offer sacrifices to the Lord, incense and a sweet savour, for a memorial to make reconciliation for his people. He gave unto him his commandments and authority in the statutes of judgment, that he should teach Jacob the testimonies and inform Israel in his laws. Yeah, so that's these talents, these roles that you're given. That's been a thing. It's like the Lord's had his men. It's like, hey, what was said unto Job? It's like, gird up your loins like a man, for the Most High requires it of thee. Verse 18. Strangers conspired together against him, and maligned him in the wilderness, even the men that were of Dathan's and Abiram's side, and the congregation of Korah with fury and wrath. This the Lord saw, and it displeased him, and his wrathful indignation were they consumed. He did wonders upon them to consume them with the fiery flame. But he made Aaron more honourable, and gave him an heritage, and divided unto him the first fruits of the increase. Especially he prepared bread in abundance, for they eat of the sacrifices of the Lord, but he gave unto him and his seed. Howbeit in the land of the people he had no inheritance, neither had he any portion among the people, for the Lord himself is his portion and inheritance. The third in glory is Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, because he had zeal and the fear of the Lord, and stood up with good courage of heart when the people were turned back, and made reconciliation for Israel. Therefore was there a covenant of peace made with him, that he should be the chief of the sanctuary and of the people, and that he and his posterity should have the dignity of priesthood forever. So yeah, the Lord basically had... That's the thing as well. It's like you go to the time of the forefathers, it's like that's when things were being set up in order. And really a lot of it is shadow of things to come. Because even from Judges it says, what, now shall we rehearse the righteous acts? We've yet to be even perfected. So we're still, that creature that's been made subject to vanity. So that's why it's like Yahushua has come, he's done what he's done. And now it's like we've got the opportunity to basically get. And that's going to come through what? That great tribulation. We're going to receive that salvation where, hey, we get, Lord willing, we're of them men. We get beamed up into the chariot and saved out of the destruction. And then what? Get them new bodies, get perfected, man. That new covenant with the laws in our mind. And that's what has been strived for from the beginning. Because that's why it's the fault there was the fault with the first covenant. What the fault was us. It was in us. In Israel that lacked the capability to keep it. Because there was no fault with the laws. And that's Esau's his what's it called, man? his wicked imagination is that there should be no law, no nothing, and you just go out and do whatever the hell you want. But then that results in a situation in a kingdom like this, where it's just what nothing but madness and complete and total insanity, and people are just doing all kinds of wild BS, and then gaining fame and glory for it. So this is what there was a covenant. So according to the covenant made with David, son of Jesse of the tribe of Judah, that the inheritance of the king should be to his posterity alone, so the inheritance of Aaron should also be unto his seed. The Most High give you wisdom in your heart to judge his people in righteousness, and that their good things be not abolished, and that their glory may endure forever. Yeah, so David was given that inheritance of king. I was gonna touch on going to David because it's the way the Lord set him up. It's the same thing with what is it, Abraham, where it's like the faith. It showed the difference. Difference was shown between what's his name, between just regular men and then David. Primarily really with Saul, because Saul was the one who was first given the kingship, but then what? It's like he was rebellious. This is what rebelling is as a sin of witchcraft. So then it was given unto David, and it's like what? First thing you see from it is the faith. So I'll read this. So verse 7, no, 1 Samuel 17 and 20 says, and David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, and went as Jesse had commanded him. Oh well. Let me start from 17. It says, and Jesse said unto David his son, take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. Now Saul and they of the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, and left the sheep with a keeper, and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and slew his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. Yeah, and it's funny as well, because it's like, it says what, the names of the great men, they'll endure forever. It's like even now to this day, you still have like the David and Goliath is basically seen as like just someone small taking down someone big. If you have like I don't know, MMA or something, any kind of conflict where you have like a smaller guy and a bigger guy, they'll say also David and Goliath. That's how it's even in this completely disconnected culture.
Japan and China.
Now, yeah, it's always being applied. Because why? Because the names of those men, their deeds have endured. And it's like Yahushua is to the point where the ages are still named, numbered after Yahushua coming on the scene. So that's like, that's the significance, and it shows the difference of like how, people try and behave like the scriptures are just made up, just a real interesting story. Or, people are high on mushrooms. But, hey, these words are real. These words live. And these words have bearing in the modern day. The prophecies, there's a abundance of prophecies that have yet to be fulfilled.
Even in the 7 wonders of the world, there's only one that still stands to this day. And that's the pyramids. And they were, when I was checking out a chart, that they actually made thousands of years before the other wonders of the world. At least 2,000, if my memory serves me correct, before there was even a second wonder in the world. and then they're still around after those wonders in the world were around. And the only reason why they're around through, as a sign to show you Exodus happened, about Israel building the treasure houses spoke in the book of Exodus, and then also for this kingdom, the first captivity of great significance that the children of Israel went through being Egypt, and us going into Egypt again, and this being the last of that great captivity, or the last time we go into captivity, and then we'll be delivered into the kingdom. That's the only reason why it's still there, as a monument. We used to know, well, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not speaking like I know, when we enter the kingdom, there's a good chance we're going to, smash it down, because it was, it's like an idol onto the nations. But the point being is that, damn man, I went around in circles so much. The point being is, I escaped, man. Salakia, man. Salak.
You say when you remember
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So back in 1 Samuel 17. So
too descriptive.
So what? Read 23. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his daughter's house free, his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living power? Yeah, that's how raw David was. And it's that faith. That's why it's like, you got, I might get, as well, it says what? Later on it says what? Saul killed these thousands. David kills these tens of thousands. Why? Because the Spirit was dealing with him. The Lord, it says what in Psalms, the Lord taught my hands to war. So it's like the Spirit was put on him, that raw, and that's what it says, the Lord is a man of war. So it's that raw spirit was put on David, to where it was like, yeah, he was looking like, yo, it's the Lord's with us, like we got to live in power with us. This is some uncircumcised motherfucker, man. He's looking beyond the carnal. So that's something that separates these men, man. It's that faith, because it can grab Hebrews as well. Was it 11, I believe, about faith? Because that faith, that's a signifier of the difference between the men of the Lord and just the average Joe out here. The average person out here has faith in Esau. That Isaiah 30, man, they believe in, Pharaoh and his chariots because they're many, man. All these, what are fucking boats called, man? Aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines and F-16s and whatnot. These are the things that people have faith in. But it's like, what? For the men of the Lord, they see a place to come, man. They can see it. They've got the vision of something more. And that's why it's like, hey, David was just like, yo, this... We got Yahweh Hashem Yahshua with us. Like, what's up? And it says, and the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done with the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither, and with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him towards another, and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And when I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth, and when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Yeah, so that's how raw it was. It's like the Lord, this is how you know these things are set before the world was made, man.
There's a reason why he had that level of faith. Sorry,
No, I was waiting. I thought you were gonna say more.
No, I was just waiting. And that's the reason why he had that level of faith, because he rehearsed what happened that bolstered his faith. He grabbed the lion by his beard and smote it and killed it. So he knew the Lord was dealing with him. And that's, us in this walk of faith. This is why we have this work to do. Doing sit downs, you do your personal sit downs, then you do, might do sit downs with brothers and whatnot. Then you go out on the highways and byways. Now, of all those works, basically, the different things you encounter and the different works that you do, this work isn't done by our own accord. This isn't just like, cool, yeah, no, the Spirit's got to be on you. The whole fact that you even are engaging with this word, I read it earlier, right? Anyone that you can't acknowledge the Heavenly Father and the Son without the Holy Spirit dealing with you. So it's basically you've now been given a gift, and now you got to work on the gift. And for you to even be able to work on the gift, that's the Spirit's got to be on you to do that. So with all of that, what does it do? It's a work that consistently just adds and adds to your faith, alright? And whatever dispensation you have, how much, whatever your lot is, it works in accordance with your spirit to make you that more engaged in this work, basically.
So verse 36, Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing if he have defied the armies of the living power. That's the thing, it's the same thing with now. Because right now you look at it calmly, that's why it's like, you talk to people, what can you do, fam? Look at his army. That's why it's like, even like I don't even know why. It's like you talk about like gun control in America. People like, yeah, but how are you gonna fight a man like the military and that? The man. I'm like, bro, that's why it's they're just looking at things on a carnal scale. They're not obviously the men, among us, among the brothers, there ain't no need for
the spirit, the weapons of warfare.
No, not carnal. Yeah, there's no need for us to have guns, but it's just like speaking as a hypothetical people in the world. It's kind of funny to see, but it's like their whole approach is just carnal. They're looking at things.
We ain't got to go into guns. Just more or less the thing of like, why say anything? You might as well. There's nothing you can do about it. You might as well just go along with it and keep your mouth closed, kind of thing. Because that is part of, as you said, the whole guns thing. That is part of the idea. It's like, well, if you're not even going to try and do that, what's talking about it going to even do anyway?
Mm-hmm. Verse 37, David said, moreover, Yahweh that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he shall deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and Yahweh be with thee. Yeah, so it's really about faith, because that's the thing. It's like with this current society, the way everything runs, faith is few and far between, man. That's faith is something that barely exists on the face of the earth, because the vast majority of people, they trust in what? Carnality. they'll say they have faith. They go into church, dashing dollars in the offering bowl, hoping that it multiplies into a job opportunity, or a car, or some nice shoes, you know, or a husband, or whatever. They're dreaming. They're basically they're indulged and invested in the system, man. They desire more than anything. They desire this place to go on, man. They just want their slice. That's really what that American dream has got everyone, especially mainly talking to Jake. Just got Jake just what invested in getting an outcome from that place, not realizing its true nature. So this is what and Saul armed David with his armor, and he put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. Nah, it wasn't even. It was something unfamiliar. And I'm thinking like, yo, if you go into war without armor, but then what? We put on, you know, the breastplate of faith, and the you know, we've got spiritual armor that we wear, spiritual weapons that we wield, and that's how it goes down.
And David is an example of that.
And he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of heaven, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of Yahweh of hosts, the power of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will Yahweh deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the carcasses of the hosts of the Philistine this day unto the fowls of the air, unto the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a power in Israel. Yeah, so he's dealing with straight faith. And that's the thing, is what we're really prophesying on the street is what? The end of Esau's world, man. This is something right now people can't visualize. The most people can think is, oh, China's gonna rise up after, you know, America kind of slowly decays and withers away. Then, you know, China's slowly gonna build up and blah blah blah, and everyone's gonna be speaking Mandarin in 50 years or whatever the fuck. But that's, you know, what we're dealing with is swift judgment. It says what? In 1 hour is Babylon the Great, that merchant city America, it's going to be raised in 1 hour. So this is going to be swift. That's why, through the Spirit of the Lord. Because that's it. It's like what? Wait ye upon me till I rise up to the prey. We're basically doing our work, and we're waiting for the fulfillment of the word of Yahweh Hashem Yahushua. And then once that's fulfilled, hey, it's a wrap. And all this assembly shall know that Yahweh saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is Yahweh's, and he will give you into our hands. And that reminds me of I believe it's Gideon, where it's like the 300, where
Gideon.
Yeah. Where it was I think it was Gideon.
Yes, Gideon.
Where it was had the army of the men of Israel, and then he had, I think, first said like, oh, those that are scared go back, or those that have newlywed go back,
According to the law.
and then it was, what do you call it? Those that make them drink water, and those that lap it up as a dog. Those will take. There was like 300 that were left. So then and it was like why the numbers were less, so that men wouldn't boast themselves thinking it was, of carnal means by which the victory was achieved, but through the Spirit. And that's how the Lord gets down. The Lord's basically like, look, the honors stand with Him. It's all done through Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. That's why it's like us now. We're in the situation. That's the thing is for an army of like, I don't know, let's say 10. I can't remember how many it was originally. Let's say 10,000 versus like 12,000. It's not that much of a stretch. But you could pull it off. But then what? When it's like completely like now us, Jake, that are just in the bottom. Nobody's in this society. Some forgotten, some you got an odd basketball player or rapper. But other than that, them Jake, who the hell are these blacks and Latinas? But then what? It's gonna be that those are the ones that are raised up, and that's why it's gonna be such a marvel. They're gonna say, yo, what is it? Hosea 1:10. It'll show, it'll be known who are the sons of the living power. Because that's how it's gonna get down. It's gonna be a shock and awe, but it's what? It's through faith, and that's why David was the one who had his house basically set, and is really what had the honor of bringing out Yahushai, who was originally what? Solomon, the son of David, and then what? Through Yahushai, that's how that new covenant was built. And then it was, and as well in the in the end, in what, this present time with the salvation, is what, that house of David is going to be rebuilt. So he's still going to receive the honor. And it came to pass when verse 48, and it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David is one stone. That's how you know it's through faith. That's the thing, is that's how the Lord gets down. It's like when the judgment's playing out, most times it's just swift and clean. It's like even what, going back a few chapters, like Agag, when Saul spared him, then what, Samuel's like, yo, what's going on? Like, why is this motherfucker here? Why do I see, you've completely,
why is it bleeding?
Yeah, bleeding and mooing and shit. Like, what the fuck's going on? It was like, I brought it to say, it's like, yo, why don't you just follow the instructions, man? That's that stiff-necked spirit, man. Which that's why, and that shows House of Saul, that rebellious, stiff-necked spirit that Jake has. And it's like, what? Just the faith. Straight faithful. Where it's like, David came from humble origins as well. Watching the sheep. Who's there thinking, he's watching the sheep and he dupied a lion? I can't even remember. I'm trying to think of. There's an anime where, man, I'm sure he wrestles a lion, man. But I'm like, what's based off, man. Man just suplex the lion into the ground. Like, that's how David was getting down. The spirit was on him. But it was like, he was small, he was young. But then what? The faith was legendary. That's why he's the king under Yahushua. Like, went into the order earlier. It's like, hey, it's King David at the head of the 12, and then the 12, and then 144,000. You got the order there. And that's how the Lord gets down with order. That's why it's like, hey. And then you read the stories, and then you see why. The way Abraham got down was like, hey, I can't remember who it was, but it was saying like, yeah, he was amongst a bunch, like literally left home to go into a completely different place for a bunch of heathens. None of them, didn't know none of their customs. These men are doing some funky shit, just on his ones, up in age saying like, yo, you're gonna have your posterity is gonna be the sands of the sea. Your youths are gonna be innumerable as the stars in heaven. Looking up, it's like in the city you can't see stars for shit. You got to somewhere remote where there's less light pollution and pollution in general, and you see fucking innumerable amounts of stars. And it's like, yo, looking up at that every night, like, damn. Like, you just out here in the middle of nowhere. Your wife's up in age as hell. That womb's dried up. But then what? Like, hey, the Lord can make it happen real easy. But that's what it requires, faith. And that's what he had. And that's why it's like, even with Isaac, had that one son, still had the faith, like, yo, even if Isaac gets done, then the Lord's still going to make it happen. Just a show is a show. So that's why it's like, hey, these men, it's the Lord's basically got. That's the thing is, this is why heathens can't fucking get in, aren't going to be among the elect, man. Because hey, the Lord had a different spirit put on Israel. Now you're gonna have Israelites amongst the heathen, because like you mentioned earlier, Acts chapter 2, you had it said men out of Elam, out of all different countries that came and heard the language of where they came from. So you had Jews that were scattered amongst all the other nations back then that even knew they were Israelites, let alone from the Babylonian, from the Egyptian, from the Greek captivity, all these different captivities, men scattered among them didn't even know. Long since lost the records, or just thinking they were just Greeks or just Hamites. So that's why it's, hey, the way this thing is spiritual, and it's like, yo, the Lord's got his men, and it's by their deeds they're gonna be known, man. So this is what verse 50. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out of his sheath thereof, and slew him and cut off his head therewith. That's wild. That shows, hey, that's how it really gets. And that's how you know, hey, the Lord put that warrior spirit on David, man. Just a clean accuracy, just sing, bang, it lodged in. It was done. And then just took his own sword and chopped his head off. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. Yeah, and that's that. You go to the Deuteronomy 28, the promises